Rolling, rolling. And what is up with it, everybody? Live from the studios of WIUR at the La Penta Student Union at Iona University. It's Woolley Mammoth Wednesdays. I am your host, Cameron Woolley, bringing you the best and only the best sports on campus. So today, we are once again in the middle of the dead period in sports between the Super Bowl and opening day. And April, when the NBA playoffs and Stanley Cup playoffs and that sort of thing sort of ramps up again. But this last week, we've been getting a lot of action in the world of puck. The NHL trade deadline has been happening. The deadline's in 2 days, so more moves could be made. But a lot of big names who have been in places for a long time have been moved. And a couple of big moves happened with a couple of the teams in this area in the last week. Obviously, the big buzz that's been happening around here, the New York Rangers recently acquired Patrick Kane, 3-time Stanley Cup champion and future Hall of Famer Patrick Kane, in exchange for not very much. I think it was like a second and a third. I don't have the return right in front of me, but I know it really wasn't that much. I know the Arizona Coyotes were involved in regards to salary retention, because that's all the Arizona Coyotes are really good for anyway, is just retaining salary on old players. And on the other side of the Hudson, the New Jersey Devils, my team, made a huge move. Tom Fitzgerald finally going out there and landing one of these big RFA forwards who the Devils have constantly been in the mix for. Finally going out there and getting a big winger to complement Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes, and getting Timo Meier from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a lot of things. A lot of pieces went around in that trade, but from the Devils, it was Fabian Zetterlund, Andreas Janssen, who was really just a bad contract, Shakir Mukhamadullin, who was a defensive prospect, first-round pick in 2020, playing in the KHL right now. And God, who is the other prospect? I am just blanking on him. And Nikita Hohotyuk went to San Jose along with a first-round pick this year and a conditional second-round pick next year that can turn into a first if, I believe the condition was that the Devils made it to the Eastern Conference Final this year. And coming back to the Devils, a 2024 fifth-round pick for Colorado, and a few sort of ECHL prospects, guys to make the deal go through. Overall, 13 pieces being moved in that trade, a lot of moving parts, but obviously the headliner of that deal obviously is Timo Meier, 52 points in 57 games, currently sidelined with a bit of an injury, but he was at practice with the Devils, although in a gray non-contact jersey. But he won't play tonight in Colorado, but hopes are that he suits up in the next week, playing alongside of one of Nico Hischier's fellow countrymen, Nico Hischier, or the just tantalizing superstar Jack Hughes. So, very, very, very big move for the Devils. I want to circle back to Kane on the Rangers for a bit, because Patrick Kane, this is a bit of a polarizing move. I've seen a lot of Ranger fans cite if any of you follow this guy on Twitter named JFresh Hockey, he posts these things called player cards, really into advanced metrics. And of course, I like advanced metrics in all sports. Even though I don't use them all the time when it comes to evaluating players, I like to know about them. I like to know how they work. And the metrics, especially defensively, do not look at Patrick Kane as a very good player. Defensively, the metrics have him as one of the worst defensive forwards in the league. Which obviously, even if you don't look at the metrics, even if you just watch the games, you can tell that Patrick Kane isn't a great defender. Actually, no, it's not a not great defender. He's a terrible defender. But that's not to take away from the experience he brings. Obviously, the guy's a legend, and he's still playing really well. He's obviously not putting up 100 points a year anymore like he was in Chicago back in the mid-2010s. but he is obviously still going to be a force in that top 6, which all of a sudden now looks like one of the best units in the NHL. I mean, you got a first line of you got Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, and Vladimir Tarasenko. That is nuts. And then on the second line, you have Patrick Kane, Vincent Trocheck, and Artemi Panarin, which, by the way, Artemi Panarin, former teammates in Chicago. So, obviously, that chemistry is going to be rekindled. Panarin was one of Kane's line mates when he won the Art Ross and the Hart Trophy in 2016. So, obviously, a Ranger fans cause to be excited. Very much a reason to be excited about this guy coming in, because Patrick Kane, if nothing else, the guy's a huge name. And the Rangers, that's how they sort of run things. They like getting guys who are big names. And they're big names because they're good players. Remember, these are the same guys who traded for Wayne Gretzky in the twilight of his career, which he was still a pretty good player. Got like 97 points in 1 year with the Rangers. Again, that's not to say that Patrick Kane is Wayne Gretzky. I mean, nobody's Gretzky. But Patrick Kane, definitely another Rangers-esque move where they trade for a star player on the tail end of their career, the veteran, grizzled veteran, playoff experience. Again, 3-time Stanley Cup champion. Can't recall if he won a Conn Smythe at any point. Again, he was one of the 2 big components on that Chicago Blackhawks team that won Stanley Cups in 2010, 2013, and 2015. So Kane very much going to bring a lot to the Rangers, and that's not to detract from other teams in the East who are just loading up like crazy. You got the Tampa Bay Lightning giving up way too much for Tanner Jeannot from the Nashville Predators. Now, Jeannot mostly was seen as like a bottom 6 guy. Had like 40 points last year as a rookie, so there's potential. But mostly just serves the purpose as a gritty, throw the body around on the 3rd and 4th line, bottom 6er, can kill penalties. There's value in that on a team. Just value that doesn't exactly warrant dealing multiple high draft picks. There was like a 1st rounder, a 2nd rounder, 3rd rounder, 4th rounder. I know it was some crazy return on the draft pick side of it. So, Tampa Bay giving up a lot. The Toronto Maple Leafs loading up. They traded for Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty from the Chicago Blackhawks. Again, the Blackhawks really selling off. This deadline, definitely a seller's market in the NHL for sure, with the assets that are being thrown around. And then the Leafs turning around and dealing Rasmus Sandin, one of their better defensemen, to Washington in exchange for a 1st-round pick. So the Capitals suddenly are getting a solid defenseman. A team that shouldn't be dealing off 1st-round picks. Obviously, at this point in their window very much closing. But again, like I said before, hockey GMs are idiots, and their way of thinking is very much skewed by things that aren't really logical. And the Washington Capitals definitely living in denial on this. Their counterparts, the Pittsburgh Penguins, don't know if they're going to be making any move, but I heard some whispers that they are going to try and push for one of the big forwards on the Vancouver Canucks. The rumors that you've been hearing for like the last 3 years: JT Miller, Brock Besser, and now Elias Pettersson is all of a sudden thrown in the trade wins for Vancouver. So that is going to definitely be a storyline to see be played out, to see if another team in the East tries to load up on a big-time forward. And overall, the Eastern Conference right now at the trade deadline is one massive arms race, because there's a clear distinction between the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference in the NHL this year. Yeah, you have the West, who's like, solid. Okay, you got teams like, obviously, the Colorado Avalanche, the defending champs. You got like Vegas, they're always a threat. You got the Oilers, the McDrysaddles, who recently got Matthias Ekholm in exchange for Tyson Berry. That's going to be a great trade for them. But on the other side, the East is just so loaded with talent. And there's only more talent getting added. Again, this trade deadline. Again, like you're going to look at teams like Boston, who haven't really loaded up that much on big pieces. But do they need to load up on big pieces when they're on pace to break the wins record? Got in the Metro, Carolina traded for Jesse Puljujarvi. And they were obviously in the mix for Timo Meier. You got to wonder, Carolina's got to be livid that they didn't make a deal for Meier when he ended up in their division. All of a sudden, their hold on the Metro is going to be loosened up because the Devils are going to be coming up for him. The Devils, obviously, they were great before. They had 39 wins before they traded for Meier. Yeah, the Rangers, they were already a threat before they traded for Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. They were already one of the more talented teams in the league before they traded for those two studs. And in the Atlantic, again, Boston on pace to break the wins record. They don't even need to add anything. They're so good that their goalie literally scored a goal. So that is how the year's going for the Boston Bruins. Yeah, the Lightning, granted, overpaying by a lot, but also going out there and getting a forward who can contribute in the playoffs. Again, this has happened before with Tampa. When they traded for Barclay Goodrow and Sam Hagel, or Brandon Hagel, sorry. Everyone thought, like, wow, they paid way too much for Brandon Hagel and Barclay Goodrow. But you know what? They won multiple Stanley Cups. So who am I to judge whether they overpay? Because, again, the Tampa Bay Lightning, let's be honest, how valuable is their first-round pick been in the last few years? Tell me honestly. The most valuable their first has been in the last 5 years was in 2019 when they had a historic regular season but got swept by the Blue Jackets in the first round, which was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But it also woke up a giant in Tampa Bay. So, again, 2 days left. Plenty of moves still to be made. Obviously, the rumor mill is going crazy, and I thought the NBA trade deadline was crazy. But the thing is, crazy NBA trade deadlines happen all the time. The player pool, it's so liquid over there. Now, speaking in like finance terms, it's so liquid. The players are dealt so easily because it's a player-controlled league. Every player, every star player, it's gotten to a point where every star player at some point in their careers is going to demand a trade. Stuff like this in the NHL, this is out of character for a trade deadline. Every move is being made. So many crazy things are happening. And then the Eastern Conference, by God, as a fan of a team in the East, oh my, it is going to be brutal going into a playoffs. Is like a reason I want the Devils to push to win the Metro, because if we don't win the division, we have the reward of playing a home playoff series. I say home because it's going to be 50-50 in every game in that series if the Devils do play the Rangers. But they have the gift of playing a quote-unquote home playoff series against the New York Rangers, who again just loaded up on 2 stud top 6 wingers. So again, that series, oh man. If that happens, I know at some point in the playoffs, the Devils are going to play the Rangers. It's inevitable. Because if the Devils leapfrog Carolina, Carolina's going to play the Rangers, and the Rangers, honestly, I have them beating Carolina. And if the Devils win the division, they're going to go up and play like the Islanders, or like what, the Capitals, the Penguins, please. Like, Red, like, I do respect those teams. Like, I'm not going to go in saying, like, oh, it's going to be a pushover. But in all likelihood, if the Devils play any of the wildcard teams in the East, they win that series in, like, 5 games. That is how ridiculously loaded the Devils are at this point. And it's something that I have a pleasure saying it because the Devils haven't been this good in 10 years. Hell, I'm going to go as far as say that this team, talent-wise, is better on paper than the team that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2012. Because that team had so many weird factors about them. They had a line of God, what was it? They had Adam Henrique as a rookie scoring multiple series winning goals in overtime. You had the fourth line, Ryan Carter. You had Ryan Carter and Steve Bernier scoring multiple big goals before Steve Bernier lost them the cup in Game 6 against LA. Which, speaking of LA, they traded Jonathan Quick, their two-time Cup champion goaltender. Yeah, really just shipping him out. Last year of his career, they traded him to Columbus. And now he wants to get traded to become a third stringer on some playoff team. So, yeah, that's a storyline that's got to play out. Overall, just craziness. The Eastern Conference, circling back, you have the current slate of playoff series, Devils-Rangers. Again, like I mentioned before, that's going to be a brutal. That series is going at least 6 games. Because in the games that the Devils and Rangers have played this year, they've played 3 games. All of them have been decided in the final few minutes of the third period. As in the first game, the Devils, they controlled that game mostly. The first game that they played at the Garden, the Devils mostly controlled that game. But it got a little close at the end, but then they scored an empty netter. The second game at the Garden, Devils blew a 2-goal lead in the third. Rangers won in overtime. And then in the third game, it was the reverse. Rangers blew a 2-goal lead in the third, and the Devils won in overtime. So these two teams already are evenly matched. And then they basically matched each other's moves at the deadline because even though the Rangers had more, the Devils added a player who, at this point in their respective careers, Timo Meier is better than Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. And I'm not saying that because I'm a biased Devils fan. You can ask any hockey fan who isn't a Devils or Rangers fan. They're going to say, yeah, Timo Meier is overall right now the better player because he's 26 years old and he's entering his prime. Meanwhile, Tarasenko and Kane are in their 30s. So that is going to be a series that's going to play out, and it's going to be nuts. You got Carolina, who's, if they win the Metro, they're going to bulldoze whoever they play. In the Atlantic, you have the Bruins, who are probably going to just blow out whoever they play in the first round. Then you have Toronto and Tampa Bay, who are also loading up on players. So that's going to be a crazy series. That series went 7 last year. But again, as I've said before, when teams choke in the playoffs, I don't trust them to win until they show me that they can win. Until they show me that they can get over that hump, I am not going to trust them to get over that hump. I think the same way with the Yankees, and I think the same way with the Maple Leafs. I think they are going to lose in that series whenever it's played. But in the West, they're just going to be casually they're just going to be, playing around, they're going to be finger painting, while the East is just beating each other over the head with so many, these playoffs. And I'd say it so many times. The Stanley Cup playoffs, the best thing in sports. The best playoffs in sports. Easily hockey. Easily. Because, you want to talk about heart attacks as a fan. I thought a playoff baseball, that's a heart attack. Because pitch by pitch, everything can change. It's a volatile game. But multiply that, but with constant action and even more volatile in hockey. Granted, I haven't experienced this in a while, but in 2018, when the Devils won that playoff game in Game 3 of the quarterfinals against Tampa Bay, they were up by a goal with 7 minutes left. My heart was in my throat the whole time. I am going to have a heart attack, and there wasn't even a single overtime game in that series. Playoff hockey overtime, there is no time for a breather. In baseball, yeah, there's a breather. When you're up and your team comes up to bat, that's a breather. You have the commercial breaks between innings, that's a breather. In football, should you have the commercial breaks and the constant downtime? Yeah, that's a breather. In basketball, how many commercial breaks are there in a single game? That's a breather. Although, granted, basketball isn't as much of a breather as the other previous two sports I mentioned. But in hockey, there's no breather. You don't get any breathers. It's constant action, back and forth. It's like it's a tie game in the third period, or God forbid, overtime. And then if nobody scores in overtime, you have double overtime and then triple overtime. There was a game in the bubble in 2020 between Columbus and Tampa that went to like 6 overtimes. I don't know how I'd be able to live through that as a fan, but I'm excited. As a Devils fan, oh man, I am excited to finally get to watch some playoff hockey. I'm probably going to end up going to one of the games because, again, playoff hockey, best experience in sports is playoff hockey. And again, the Devils have been terrible for the last few years. Granted, I love just being a bystander and spectating and watching other teams lose it. I'm watching other people pull their hair out, watching their team play a game that goes into 3 overtimes. Yeah, it's fun watching from the sideline, but it's fun to get in there and actually watch your team be the one who's going in and playing those high stakes games and having the heart attack. Because there is no harder trophy to win in sports than the Stanley Cup. And for all the reasons I just mentioned are all valid as to why the Stanley Cup is the hardest trophy to win in sports. I can't think of a sport that is more physically demanding than hockey. Because basically it's like, oh, football, they hit each other. But yeah, in hockey, you're on ice skates. You're on ice skates flying at 20 miles an hour. Going in the boards and checking everybody and hitting people and all of that. The physics of hockey make it way harder to play physically than football. At least I think. Granted, baseball, it's really like a lot of hand-eye in baseball. The hand-eye in baseball is way harder than any sport in the world. Trying to hit a 98-mile-an-hour fastball is one of the hardest things in sports. Actually, no. I'm going to say it's the hardest thing to do in sports, is hit an upper 90s fastball, or God forbid, like a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. The human body was not made to react to things that fast. But in hockey, you have the hand-eye, you have some of the hand-eye of baseball, the physicality of football, and the stamina of basketball, all put into a single sport. Again, hockey, playoff hockey, it's the best. One thing that I've come to realize in the last few years, out of all the American sports, all the major American sports leagues, say what you will about Gary Bettman, awful commissioner. Yes, he has insisted on making hockey work in the areas that hockey, isn't really supposed to work. Like in Arizona, they insist on keeping the Coyotes in Arizona. They insist on keeping the Panthers in Sunrise. And they happen to hit on Vegas. Las Vegas just happened to become a hockey town because their team started winning off the bat. If that team has been losing for the last few years like they were supposed to, then the Raiders would have taken over that town tenfold over the Golden Knights. But the Golden Knights are a relatively competent organization compared to the Raiders. Because the Raiders are just are a tire fire in their own right. And Vegas has won a lot of games. Granted, they have the choker label that I talked about before. But Vegas is a hockey town. But back to the point I was going to make before. Out of all the 4 major sports leagues, growing up as I've gotten older, I have realized that the NHL has the best product out of all of them. Like, I'm sorry, hockey's peak. I love football. Football will always be my pride and joy. Football will always be more special to me than those other sports because football and honestly the 2011 Giants made me fall in love with football. And baseball, that's also special to me because it goes so far back with my family with baseball. Basketball, there's no real history with me there. Also, I don't want to subject myself to the Knicks. Even though the Knicks, dude, they've been on one lately. So props to the Knicks. I'm going to have to talk about them at some point. But again, I'm not a big basketball guy. And the Knicks, let's be honest, in the playoffs, they don't really stand a chance. And then but hockey, that was all me. That was I made the decision to get into hockey. I'm the first one in my family to really get into hockey in a really big way. I'm into hockey. I love hockey. And I realized that the NHL has the best product out of all the 4 major American sports leagues. I will die on that hill. And unless the NFL changes something, unless the NBA changes something, and unless MLB changes a lot of things, hockey and the NHL is going to remain overall the best product in American sports. I'll leave it at that. I'm going to make it just a hockey episode today. I was going to talk about spring training, but no, I'll save that for next week when the storm blows over in the NHL, because this honestly should be the biggest story in sports right now. It's the NHL trade deadline and all of these pieces that are being moved around. So, anyways, that'll be all from me. This has been Woolley Mammoth Wednesdays. I have been your host, Cameron Woolley, wishing you a great rest of your week. Again, spring break coming up soon for Iona University. Also, I want to give a congratulations to the men's and women's basketball teams for clinching the #1 seed in the MAC for their upcoming tournaments. So obviously, good luck to them. Obviously, also want to give a shout out to the program that I work with a lot, Iona Esports. They are going to be traveling alongside the basketball team to Atlantic City for their conference tournament in the MAC. So obviously, these guys have been preparing all year. They've been playing a lot of games. Rocket League going to look to defend their title. Overwatch going to try to avenge their defeat last year. And Smash, obviously, they're working hard. League of Legends, Valorant, everyone's working hard. I'd really love if you could give them their support. And once again, this has been Cameron Woolley of Woolley Mammoth Wednesdays. Wishing you a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. And take care.